the Canon EOS M5, $1,000 mirrorless camera, definitely Canon's best mirrorless camera to date, and overall it's a pretty good camera. And I want to nail this because I'm going to say a bunch of criticisms about the camera. I'm going to be comparing it against other cameras that are better at specific things, but what I want you to remember is this is overall a good camera that does just about everything pretty well. It's not going to blow you away. There's nothing about it that's revolutionary, but it's a good all-around camera, kind of a master of all, a jack of all trades, a master of none. If you find the review helpful, you can help support us by using our link to shop at Amazon, stp.io/M5. And if you already bought it, don't watch a review of it. You'll just end up irritated. Instead, go to stp.io/tutorials, where we will actually teach you how to use the camera, help you get the most out of it. That's what matters more anyway. The controls on this camera are really the best I've ever seen on a Canon camera. They're really pretty remarkable. And Canon, they did things completely differently, which is to say they did things almost exactly like Sony and Pentax. It's almost like they borrowed it, but that's okay because it works well. Like the exposure compensation dial here with physical numbers on that. Oh, I like that so much better than looking at the 80s LCD screens that they're put on their DSLR. That's so nice to know right away and have that analog experience. The main dial just feels great. It's this like rugged metal, and they put on another dial up here which you can use to adjust the ISO, and you can switch it to do different tasks. This is just like a Pentax, so I can like set it to ISO here and then adjust the ISO right from here without having to hit a second button and do that. And then of course you have a secondary dial down here for adjusting, the aperture if you're in manual mode. Anyway, the control scheme is really much better, and I don't miss having that LCD screen on top at all. I think they made a mistake though in the placement of the back button. I have come to rely on back button focus, and maybe you don't use it, but you can assign the star to the back button focus, but look how I have to hold my hand if I want to hit that. And what you really want is a back button focus button like over here somewhere. They could hide it. They don't have to put it on the screen. They could put it right next to the screen, make it pop out a little bit. And they didn't do that. So if you love back button focus, you're not gonna like that. Notice that there's no thumbstick on the back of the camera, and that could be really irritating to those of us accustomed to better quality Canon DSLRs. If you want to change your focusing point, well, it has a touchscreen, and the touchscreen works really, really well. But they also implemented a feature called touch and drag, where you can put the viewfinder up to your eye and then drag your hand across the corner here. And honestly, it works pretty amazing. And I like it better than a thumbstick. It's faster, it's more precise. You can really quickly scroll from one side of the screen to the other. It's downright remarkable, and I'd love to see that implemented on every camera. I'll also say the touchscreen on this camera is absolutely amazing. You wouldn't think there'd be a huge difference between touchscreens, but this one is really good. Let's talk about the electronic viewfinder here. It's really beautiful. There's a huge difference between viewfinders on different cameras. Like that Fuji X-T2 probably has the best in class viewfinder. And if you look at like the Sony a6000, 6300, 6500s, good viewfinders, but they're workable. They're not outstanding. This Canon, I think, it really seems to be among the best of them in that it seems very fast and very sharp. And if you're coming from the DSLR world and you're thinking about mirrorless cameras, this electronic viewfinder is one of the best reasons to switch. Just, if nothing else, because you can see a histogram in the viewfinder. You can block out all the sunlight. You don't have to use the back of the screen to get a real preview of what you're shooting. No chimping, no like shooting and then reviewing your picture, which is a DSLR process with mirrorless cameras with an electronic viewfinder. You already know you got the shot when you hit the shutter because you were looking at an exact preview of it. You could see your histogram and everything. Anyway, even among mirrorless cameras, this is a great viewfinder. The screen on the back is also great. It just feels like higher resolution and better quality. It's brighter and contrastier than most other touchscreens. While most cameras, including other Canon cameras like the 5D series, the back screens are just okay. If you hold it up against your smartphone screen always has a better screen. This, I think, is more like smartphone quality. It looks good. It's not like the best smartphones, but it's a good quality back screen. It flips down like this, so you can kind of get selfies, but at the same time, that's not a great design. I'll tell you what's a better design. A better design is like this E-M1 Mark II or the GH4 or the G7 screen that flips out to the side. And this allows you to get selfies, but it also allows you to set the camera on a tripod and see it. Whereas with this screen, once you put it on a tripod, you can't really see the screen at all, and you certainly can't access it for touch to focus. So if you're filming yourself, obviously that's going to happen a lot because you need to be able to see yourself. If somebody else is filming you, I still find the flip screens really useful because Justin will frequently flip the screen around and just show me how much of me is in the scene, where I need to like hold the camera up so it's make sure it's in frame. Anyway, I don't know why they wouldn't have it flip out to the side like the 80D. It's a better design, but they didn't do it. I think that was a mistake. It does also flip down so you can see it from below. It's better than having a fixed screen like they do in the full frame cameras, but it's not as good as the side flip screen. The focusing in it is great. It has great focusing for a mirrorless camera. I see some reports saying it's just as good as their DSLRs. It's not as good as a DSLR when you're using like the viewfinder and an 80D. If you're planning to shoot something that's focusing intensive, like sports, flying birds, that kind of thing, I'm still going to recommend you get into a DSLR. With that said, it's very workable. I can't say that it's better than the A6500 or the X-T2 or these other cameras that have best-in-class mirrorless focusing, but it's good. Where it is better than any other camera is when you're recording video. It can very smoothly shift focus from one point to another in a cinematic way. If you try to refocus with any of these other cameras, it's going to be kind of smooth and jerky, and it's not something you'd want to use in footage. So if you plan to change focus while filming, the focusing on the M5 is really going to be great. It's just basically the same as it is in the 80D. If you are into posting pictures on Instagram, the wireless on this camera is really among the best I've ever used. I can't think of a camera that I found easier to use. Canon added Bluetooth capabilities into this camera, and that made the whole process a little bit simpler, but they've also made some updates to their app that just make it work very good. Now, it doesn't automatically transfer images in the background like Nikon SnapBridge does, but it actually works reliably, which Nikon SnapBridge does not. They just haven't ironed out the problems with SnapBridge. So right now, for people wanting to transfer images to Instagram on the go, this is kind of my favorite camera ever. Let's look at a couple of images and talk about the image quality, because it kind of falls in between. A quick summary is the image quality is good. It's not better than other cameras in its class, but you're also not going to be irritated by it. We have the M5 on the left and the A6500 from Sony on the right. A6500 is about the same image quality as the A6300 if you're curious. And as we look at them, there's not a huge difference. They're just about the same. Let's zoom in all the way to 2:1 so we can see things clearly. If we pan over and we look in the worst of the shadows, we can see the A6500 is perhaps just a little bit cleaner, but there's just not a huge difference between the two cameras. And that's good because Sony has good image quality, the Canon has good image quality. Likewise, if we compare the Canon to the Fujifilm X-T2, both cameras have great image quality. I will say you start to see the difference in the lens qualities here. I was using like a higher quality f2.8 lens for the Fuji, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Canon doesn't have any fast or high quality zooms for the Canon EOS M series. You have to adapt lenses and thereby kind of give up a lot of the benefits that you would otherwise see as far as size and weight and usability go. So as far as limiting ourselves to native lenses, you can see the Fuji is capable of producing better results overall because of the better lens selection. But the actual image quality and noise, Fuji is a little bit better, but it's not a huge difference. If we compare it against a Micro Four Thirds camera, the E-M1 Mark II, the E-M1 Mark II actually has fantastic image quality for a Micro Four Thirds camera with its smaller sensor. But we can see it does produce just a little bit more visible noise than the Canon does with its bigger sensor. But still, the difference isn't that much, and well, the E-M1 costs twice as much, but it offers 4K video and some other benefits that we'll see in more detail in just a bit. Unlike the Sony and the Fuji, it lacks eye detection focus, but it does have face detection autofocus. We did find that the face detection AF was good enough even at 200mm and f2.8. Unlike other Canon cameras, it does include focus peaking, which is useful when manually focusing the camera. Talking about video quality, this camera, it might be okay for vloggers who want to shoot everything in 1080p and care more about content than the actual quality of the video, but I found it just paled in comparison to any other camera in a similar price range. Let's start with comparing it to the Panasonic G7, which is only $600 with a lens. And what I found was that the video quality out of the G7 was substantially better, partially because it does record in 4K. So it records at 4 times the resolution. And that means that you have a lot of flexibility. Even if you're going to publish in 1080p, you'll get better video quality. And if you don't believe me, you can watch this other video that we have at sdp.io/VIEWFINDER. In comparison with the G7, there are also usability benefits. As I mentioned earlier, the screen flips out from the side on the G7 rather than from below. And that means that you can hook it up to a tripod and still see what you're doing. The general feel of the G7, despite being much less expensive, is pretty similar in quality. And believe it or not, the G7, a Micro Four Thirds camera, has a far better selection of lenses. So you can get several different f2.8 zooms for it, a wide variety of primes, and overall, it's just simply going to give you better results. I also compared the video quality in low light at ISO 6400 to the A6500, the Olympus E-M1 Mark II, and the Fuji X-T2. And across the board, they all handily beat the EOS M5, which is really too bad because that's kind of what this would be great for. Because one of the benefits of having a mirrorless camera is the electronic viewfinder works when you're recording. And of course, if you have a DSLR, like any of the other Canon cameras, you cannot see through the viewfinder when you're recording, which means you have to use the back screen. And that means you can't really see the screen in bright sun. So it's just too bad because it could be the ultimate vlogger camera if only Canon could work out their 4K. But in the meantime, I'll probably instead push people towards the G7, which is just a versatile and inexpensive camera. And in fact, for $1,000, the price of this, you could get yourself a new or used Panasonic GH4. Here's a link to the Panasonic G7 if you are getting into video and you're looking at a fairly small and lightweight mirrorless camera. Another real weakness of the M lineup is the lack of lenses. Really, they have only a couple of zooms. They have a 15 to 45 variable aperture f3.5 to 6.3 and 18 to 150 f3.5 to 6.3, a telephoto zoom of 55 to 200, again 6.3 f6.3 at the long end, and then an 11 to 22 f5.6, and then 2 primes, a 22mm and 28mm. There are no f4 zooms, there are no f2.8 zooms, there are no portrait lenses. It's unbelievable how limited the lens selection is, especially coming from Canon, who prides themselves on making great glass. And I think they just expect you to use an adapter and then go into their DSLR lineup. But again, now you have a super heavy big lenses on this little tiny camera body and everything becomes unbalanced and you have to spend a couple $100 on an adapter. So I don't get it. I don't get why you'd buy this just to use an adapter and to use the Canon lenses. Either just use the DSLR that they were designed to be used for, or switch to a different mirrorless system that has more lens variety. Sony also in the APS-C world doesn't have a great variety of APS-C lenses, but Fuji really wins here. They have just amazing, high quality, incredibly sharp f2.8 zooms and amazing primes. So check out our review of the X-T2 to see just the kind of great quality you get out of that. Micro Four Thirds world, like the E-M1 Mark II, the G7, the GH4, they also have an incredible variety of lenses, including f2.8 lenses. So I have a hard time recommending the M5 just for that purpose. Like, what lens are you going to use? And as you grow and become a better photographer or filmmaker, Is Canon going to release new lenses for you? I don't know. They don't have great support for the system. They haven't been giving it much support. I also worry that there might not be a lot of good quality bodies out in the future for you to upgrade to, because you buy into an infrastructure, and right now the infrastructure for the EOS M just isn't there. A couple other little minor gripes, but things that we ran into in really using this in the real world. There's no USB charging, which is a big deal. Cameras like the Fuji and the Sony do that. And this thing has terrible battery life. It runs out of battery really fast, frustratingly fast. So you need to carry around extra batteries and you'll end up without juice at some point. And we all nowadays carry around USB chargers, or we have them in our car. So it's really nice to be able to throw it on a charger. Give us that next time, Canon. Also, I can't seem to find like a built-in intervalometer for it, in case you want to make, it can record time lapses as a video, but it won't record a series of stills over a long interval period of time. It just somehow lacks that very basic software feature. So you have to hook up an external shutter timer if you want to do that. And it just means it's one more gadget. Some people might try to get Magic Lantern working on it. It's another option, but still, it's all kind of a pain. I wish it were built in. Like just about all these other cameras, well, like the A6500 and the G7, it lacks a headphone jack. So you can hook a mic up to it, but then you can't listen to your own audio. Even as a blogger, even as a vlogger, if you're filming yourself, you might want to play the video back and just make sure you got the sound, and it's helpful to be able to hear it through some headphones. That's not going to be an option for you. It also doesn't seem to have a silent shutter feature. It always makes noise. And that's kind of a basic requirement of these cameras. They're good at being discreet. I wish they would just give me that option. So in summary, like I said, it's a good camera. And I told you I'd be making a bunch of complaints about it and making it seem like it's not good at anything. But it's a good all-around camera. You wouldn't be unhappy with it. It's not necessarily, if you're a specialist, if you're doing like focusing on video, it's probably better to get one of these other cameras. If you're a portrait photographer, you probably need to think about the lenses that you're going to use, and you'll probably just end up getting a different camera. But for a general all-purpose lens, you won't be unhappy with it. It's good at what it does. It's a good little camera. I hope you found the review helpful. Check out our book, Stunning Digital Photography. Teaches you all the photography techniques, and that makes way more of a difference than your gear ever will. Post-processing helps a lot too. We have books on both Lightroom and Photoshop, and a whole book dedicated to buying gear. Get them at sdp.io/store, or search for my name on Amazon, Tony Northrup. And of course, subscribe, it's free. If you have follow-up questions, ask them in the comments down below. Thanks, bye.